She married a scarred billionaire for a paycheck, then found a hidden nursery behind a locked door. Now, she's caught between protecting her unborn child and uncovering the truth about the baby he lost. But what if the man she fears is the only one who ever truly loved her? Before we dive into this unforgettable journey, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? If stories about love, sacrifice, and second chances speak to your heart, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we're bringing you another powerful story you won't want to miss. Lila pressed her fingers against the glass door of the hospital room, watching her son breathe beneath the hum of machines. His name was Aiden, 6 years old, fragile. Too young for a heart defect, too young to know what it meant when she said, "Mommy's trying," but she was. Every single day. She worked double shifts at the diner, scraped by on tips and instant coffee. She skipped meals to pay for prescriptions. She sold her mother's locket for a quarter of its value. And still, the number on the surgery bill didn't budge. $65,000. Not even the kindness of strangers. Then came the man in the suit. He found her in the back alley behind the diner one evening, while she was dumping trash. He introduced himself only as Mr. Geller and handed her a folder. Inside was a contract, no preamble, no small talk, just terms. 1 year. Marriage to Mr. Asher Wynn. Live in his estate. Follow 3 rules. No media, no lies, no opening locked doors. In return, $500,000, half up front, half at the end. Lila blinked at the papers, then back at the man. "Is this a joke?" "It's real," he replied coolly. "Mr. Wynn prefers discretion. You'll be compensated for your time and presence. Nothing more is expected of you. He will not require affection, just loyalty." Mr. Geller looked her dead in the eye. "Because you're desperate, and you're honest." The next day, Lila signed the contract in a sterile downtown office, her fingers trembling as she dotted the last signature. A cashier's check was handed to her before she even left the room. Enough to schedule Aiden's surgery immediately. Enough to breathe. But the price was her name, her time, her silence. A week later, she arrived at the Wynn estate, an architectural fortress tucked deep within the redwoods. Tall gates, no neighbors, windows like mirrors, walls like cold marble skin. She stepped out of the black town car, suitcase in hand, as the gates creaked shut behind her. A housekeeper named Mrs. Bell greeted her with formal nods and a tightly rehearsed smile. "Mr. Wynn is expecting you. This way, please." Lila followed her through endless hallways, past paintings that looked more like nightmares than art. Finally, they reached a study, where a single man sat in a leather chair beside the window. Asher Wynn? He was younger than she expected. 40, maybe, sharp jaw, salt-streaked hair, slate-gray eyes that didn't rise when she entered. His legs were covered by a dark wool blanket. A chair stood beside him, unused. "Miss Carter," he said without looking at her. His voice was low, clipped, or should I say, Mrs. Wynn. She swallowed. "You can call me Lila." He nodded. "Very well, Lila. I won't waste your time. You have your payment. I have your signature. We will live in this house under the terms of that contract. 1 year. No public appearances, no interviews, no guests." "Couldn't be locked doors?" she asked quietly. His eyes flicked to hers, unreadable. "Do not open them. That is my one non-negotiable." She nodded. "I understand." "I doubt you do," he murmured, "but thank you for trying." That was their first conversation. The room assigned to Lila was on the 2nd floor, far from Ash's study, far from his silence. It was immaculately furnished, with muted wallpaper and a bay window that overlooked the misty woods. But it didn't feel like hers. Nothing in this house did. Mrs. Bell brought her meals at scheduled times. The house operated like a machine, silent, precise. Asher didn't dine with her the first 3 nights. Lila ate alone, wondering if she'd become little more than a paid ghost inside a cold mansion. On the 4th evening, a note slid under her door. "Dinner, 7 p.m. West Dining Room. AY." She arrived early, unsure if she was meant to dress up or not. She settled on a simple navy dress, the same one she wore to job interviews. It made her feel like someone who still had choices. Asher was already seated when she entered. The table between them was long, silverware perfectly aligned. Candles flickered, casting tall shadows against the walls. He didn't smile, but he gestured for her to sit. Dinner was quiet. He didn't touch his wine. He barely touched his food. Lila cleared her throat after several minutes. "You don't have to do this. The formality, I mean." His fork paused. "I've found that routine keeps things civil." "You mean distant?" He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time. "I mean safe?" There it was again, that quiet pain beneath his voice, like he'd once burned and never healed. Lila leaned forward. "You said no questions, but I'm here. I live here now. Can I at least know what you used to do?" He studied her, weighing something. "I was a surgeon. Neurosurgery." She blinked. "That's a lot." 12 years ago when he wiped his mouth with a cloth napkin. Then it wasn't. Before she could respond, he changed the subject. "Mrs. Bell tells me your son is scheduled for surgery next week." She nodded slowly. "Yes, Cedars. Dr. Myers is handling the procedure." "Good man," Asher murmured. There was a flicker of humanity in his tone, not just formality, memory, maybe even longing. "Thank you," she said softly. "Big City? I didn't do anything. You gave me a way to save him. That's more than anyone else ever offered." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then, almost as if it hurt him to say it, Asher added, "I've read your file, Lila. I know you're not here for anything but survival. That's fine with me." Lila's voice was small. "What are you here for?" His lips pressed into a line. "Peace." She nodded and rose from her seat, sensing the end of the conversation. As she turned to leave, he spoke again. "Just one more thing." She glanced back. His gray eyes met hers. "I'm not a cruel man, but I am private. Respect that, and we'll get through this year without wounds." "I can do that," she whispered. He gave the faintest nod. "Good night, Lila." "Good night." She returned to her room, heart unsure if she had just spoken with a man or a closed door. Somewhere beneath the mansion's marble skin, the air whispered with secrets, and despite everything, her curiosity flickered like a match against stone. Mansion whispered secret. Lila had been living there for 2 weeks, yet every corner still felt like it belonged to someone else. The rooms were beautiful, but empty, like paintings without stories. Asher barely spoke. His presence was like a shadow, always there but never fully seen. Each morning, he was already in the greenhouse by the time she woke. Breakfast was a quiet ritual. He'd sit at the head of the table, eyes lowered, hands clasped. Lila would eat, sip her coffee, and try not to glance at the long, sealed hallway behind him, the one that led west, the one with the locked door. He never mentioned it. But she noticed. The lock gleamed like a warning. One afternoon, while dusting near the western corridor, she heard something that made her freeze mid-step. Music. Faint, elegant, tragic. A piano, hidden behind that locked door. The notes drifted down the hall like smoke, curling around her heart. She followed them. Her hand hovered near the knob. It didn't turn, locked. She leaned in, ear to the wood. And then, silence. The music had stopped. Later that night, curiosity gnawed at her like hunger. She returned to the hallway and sat against the door. Hours passed. No music. Only the hum of the wind outside. The next morning, while placing linens in the upstairs study, she knocked over a dusty box stacked behind an armoire. As she stooped to pick it up, a photograph fluttered out. It was old, faded, but unmistakably him. Asher Wynn, standing tall in crisp surgical scrubs beside a hospital operating table, smiling. Behind the photo, she found a cracked leather notebook filled with pages of handwritten medical notes, sketches of the brain, detailed neurosurgical procedures. Another item fell out, a scalpel dulled by time. Lila's breath caught. He wasn't just rich. He had once been a surgeon, maybe even a brilliant one. But why hide it? Why pretend? She returned the items carefully and said nothing at dinner, though she could barely meet his eyes. That night, she dreamed of a man seated at a piano, his back to her, blood on his hands that wouldn't wash off. The next morning, Asher noticed the way she avoided his gaze. "Something on your mind?" he asked coolly. She shook her head. "No." But her voice trembled. In the garden, she found him tending to orchids, his sleeves rolled up, exposing lean forearms and calloused fingers. He didn't look fragile. He looked controlled. "Her piano music," she blurted out. "From the West Wing." He stiffened, slowly set down his shears. "The room is off limits." "I wasn't trying to break in. I saved it's off." Something flared in his tone. Anger, yes, but also fear. "I found the photo," she whispered. His eyes snapped to hers. "You. In scrubs." Silence thickened between them. "Is that why you don't want me in there?" she asked. "Because that's the man you used to be?" His jaw clenched. "You don't know what you're asking." "I'm not asking. I'm trying to understand." He turned away. "Don't try to fix me, Lila." "It wasn't," she said softly. "But maybe you're the one who's been hiding from the truth." He didn't respond. But as she brushed past him to leave, their hands touched. He flinched. Then he didn't pull away. Just a second, just a brush. But enough to remind them both, they weren't stone, they weren't strangers anymore. That evening, the mansion felt heavier, like the walls had heard too much. Lila lay in bed, eyes open to the ceiling. Every creak in the house sounded like a question she couldn't answer. Why hide who he was? Why act like the piano didn't exist? Why did his eyes carry so much sorrow? She couldn't sleep. So she wandered. She found herself in the greenhouse again, drawn by the soft glow of moonlight filtering through the glass. And there he was, Asher, sitting in the corner, sketching with charcoal. A surgical diagram by the looks of it. Arteries, nerve bundles, pathways only someone deeply trained would know. He didn't see her at first. Or maybe he did. His hand moved with purpose, lines crisp, precise, hands that claimed to be broken, yet created with elegance. "But you're not paralyzed, are you?" she asked. Asher stopped. The charcoal slipped from his fingers and hit the stone floor with a soft clink. He turned slowly, not angry, just tired. "I never said I was." "You never said you weren't." He nodded, as if that was fair. "I don't play games, Lila." "And why this one?" All eyes met hers, steady and unreadable. "Because silence keeps people away, and I wanted to be alone." "Is that really true?" she asked. For the first time, something cracked in his voice. "No, but it's safer." She stepped forward, kneeling by the drawing. "You are a surgeon. Now, you tend orchids and pretend not to feel." He exhaled. "I lost everything that day. My license, my career, my name. The media made me a villain, and I didn't fight back. Maybe because a part of me believed I deserved it. You didn't hurt that woman. But I couldn't save her." Lila's throat tightened. He continued quietly. "You know what haunts me most? Not the headlines. Not even the betrayal from the woman I was going to marry. It's the fact that I can still feel it. What it's like to hold a life in your hands. And now, I don't know what to do with that memory." Lila reached for the charcoal and placed it in his hand. "Then don't throw it away. You don't need to be a surgeon to matter. You just need to stop hiding." He didn't say anything, but his fingers curled around the stick, holding it tight. Later, as they walked back toward the house in silence, a gust of wind quoted a curtain in the hallway. The breeze carried a sound. She stopped. He did too. "I dream of playing," he admitted. Some nights when the ghosts sleep, I heard you. He didn't look surprised. Was it real? She asked. He nodded. Everything I was is still in there. I just don't always know how to let it out. They reached the stairs and he paused. You should get some rest. She wanted to ask more, but something in his voice said he'd already said too much. As she turned to go, he called her name softly. Sheila. She turned. I don't know how to be this, persisted Eugene, but if you're still here in the morning, maybe I'll try. Her heart skipped. I'll be here, she said. I'm not afraid of locked doors. He gave the smallest smile she'd ever seen. And somehow, it was more powerful than any music. The rain had begun to fall again, soft and rhythmic against the tall glass windows of the east wing. Lila sat by the fireplace in the library, watching the fire lick at the logs, her thoughts echoing like footsteps in the hollow of her chest. Life at the estate had become a puzzle, pieces scattered between silence, glances, and doors that never opened. Asher had grown slightly more talkative, though still wrapped in his layers of guarded distance. He answered when she asked about the garden or dinner plans, but his words were clipped, cautious. It wasn't until one cold evening, over a quiet meal, that he asked her a question. What did you want to be? He said, not looking up from his plate. The question caught her off guard. Me? He finally looked at her. Yes, before life changed. Lila swallowed, her fingers curled around her fork. I wanted to be a nurse. His brows rose ever so slightly. You would have been good. She gave a dry laugh. I still study at night. Online classes, textbooks, doesn't pay for food though. Asher nodded slowly. What happened? Got pregnant. Evan, my son's father, left. I lost my job, then my apartment. The world just... Silence fell between them. She didn't expect pity from him, but she saw something flicker in his eyes. Understanding? Later that week, Lila passed the study on her way to the kitchen and paused. The door was cracked open, just enough. She peeked inside. There he was, seated at the wide mahogany desk, hunched over paper, his left hand sketching with surgical precision. Her breath caught. Wasn't just a drawing, it was a spinal column, rendered in exact detail. Notes were scribbled along the side, in abbreviations only a doctor would know. She stepped inside, quietly. That's not... beginner's doodly. Asher stiffened, his pen froze. You used to be a surgeon, didn't you? Still no answer. I saw the photo, she continued. You were wearing scrubs. There were textbooks, journals. He finally turned toward her. His face held no surprise, just the weight of a truth long buried. Yes, he said. I was a neurosurgeon, one of the youngest to be certified in the state. She moved closer, voice softer. What happened? He looked at the window, where rain streaked the glass like falling memories. There was a surgery. Complicated. The patient didn't make it. Lila felt her chest tighten. So, they took your license? Everything, he said. My reputation, my name, and someone I trusted made sure the world knew only one version of the story. Your legs, she asked gently. He paused. That came later. Her voice trembled. You're not paralyzed, are you? He didn't answer, but he didn't have to. The quiet said everything. Lila sat down slowly on the edge of the desk, her eyes never leaving him. Why pretend, Asher? His fingers curled slightly around the pencil. Because when the world sees you as broken, they stop asking for explanations. They stop expecting anything from you. She could feel the pain in his voice. It wasn't just about the scandal. It was about betrayal, shame, isolation. You disappeared on purpose, she said. I disappeared to survive, he replied. I couldn't walk into another hospital without the whispers. Couldn't trust the hands that used to save lives. So I told the world I was done, and it believed me. Lila looked at the sketch again, traced one of the drawn vertebrae with her fingertip. But you still think like a surgeon. He gave a faint smile. Thinking is the only thing they didn't take. A long silence passed between them. The firelight flickered against his face, revealing a vulnerability Lila hadn't seen before. Not in his silence, not in his distance, but in his need to still be seen as something more than ruined. She stood and crossed the room slowly. He didn't flinch when she came closer. She reached for his hand. "You could have told me." "I didn't want you to stay, out of pity," he said. "I needed to know if someone could see past what I'd lost." "But I do see you, Asha," she whispered. "But I do see you. I see the man you were, the man you still are." His throat moved with a hard swallow. "You shouldn't. I'm not who I used to be." She said gently, "You're more than that." She left him then, letting her words hang in the air like something sacred. That night, Lila couldn't sleep. She wandered down the hall, drawn again by the sound of music. The piano, soft, hesitant notes echoing through the house. They carried sorrow and something close to hope. She followed the melody to the west wing. The door was ajar. Asher sat at the grand piano, eyes closed, fingers gliding across the keys with surprising fluidity. No hesitation. No surprising. The music rose and fell like a secret he'd only ever told to the night. She stood there, barely breathing. When the final note lingered in the air, he looked up and saw her. "I didn't mean to interrupt," she said softly. He didn't look away. "You didn't?" She stepped inside, crossing the room slowly. "That piece? Was it yours?" He nodded. "Wrote it the week I left everything behind." She moved closer to the piano, resting her hand gently on its polished surface. "It doesn't sound like something broken." He gave a quiet chuckle. "Maybe that's because I was still trying to hold on." Lila looked at him, her voice quiet. "You still are." Asher glanced down at his hands. "And you?" She met his eyes. "I've been holding on so long, I forgot what it felt like to be held." He didn't touch her, but his expression shifted, something unspoken passed between them. An understanding, a spark. In that moment, neither of them was pretending. They were just two people, scarred, silent, and slowly learning how to feel again. Lila had only meant to organize the study, dust off the shelves, straighten the books. But behind one of the lower cabinets, tucked away like a buried secret, she found a manila folder. She hesitated, then opened it. The headlines hit her like a slap. "Top neurosurgeons, licensed revoked, after tragic surgery." Dr. Asher Wynn under fire. Fiancé leaks internal files. Botched brain procedure ends career of golden boy surgeon. Photos accompanied the articles. Asher, once youthful and proud, standing beside hospital executives. In another, he looked exhausted, cornered by microphones, as the media devoured his. Lila sat down, her breath shaky. There were scans inside the folder too, handwritten notes in precise lettering. She flipped through them, recognizing medical terms. These weren't just old clippings. This was the file of a man who once held lives in his hands and lost everything in a single, irreversible moment. Later that evening, she found Asher in the greenhouse. He sat under a soft canopy of hanging vines, hands buried in the soil near a cluster of ferns. She stood in the doorway, folder in hand. "You lied to me." He didn't move. "I know. You let me think you were just damaged. But you faked it. You disappeared from the world." Asher looked up, his face calm but tired. "I wasn't hiding from the world, Lila. I was hiding from myself." She stepped forward, laying the folder on the table beside him. "You were one of the best surgeons in the country. Why let it all go?" He reached for a leaf, brushing it clean with his thumb. "Because one mistake cost a woman her life, and the hospital, the media, they wanted someone to blame. Juliet, my fiancée, she leaked emails, internal reports. The board revoked my license within days. I couldn't even defend myself." Lila's voice dropped. "And the wheelchair? I could walk. I just didn't want to stand anymore." He looked at her then, raw honesty brimming in his eyes. It was easier to live in silence. No expectations, no headlines, no questions. She sat across from him, her heart pounding. You brought me here under false pretenses." He winced. "I didn't know who you were, not at first. Your name was in a file sent from the agency. A match. That's all. With someone recommended me." He nodded. "Yes. I asked. They wouldn't tell me who, only that the file was expedited. Precise. Like it had already been decided." Lila felt her pulse quicken. That night, after Asher had gone to bed, she pulled her own copy of the marriage contract from her suitcase. She examined every page, every signature. Then she saw it. Oven Evan Hale, listed as a character reference. Her stomach dropped. Kevin. The man who walked out on her when she told him she was pregnant. The man who vanished before her son was even born. And the same man who once served as chief of surgery at Asher's hospital. The next morning, she left without telling Asher. She drove to the hospital listed on the old records. State Police Department, HOCD, Evans. He looked older, but no less smug. Sitting behind his polished desk, he raised an eyebrow as she entered. "Lila, didn't expect to see. You set me up." "I gave you a way out," he said simply. "You needed money. He needed someone quiet, someone who wouldn't dig too deep." "You mean someone you thought was still broken?" Evan shrugged. "I did what was necessary." Lila stared at him, disbelief and disgust curling in her chest. "You don't get to rewrite my story." Without another word, she turned and walked out. When Lila returned to the estate, dusk had already fallen. The house felt different, hollow, as if it knew something had cracked. She found Asher on the back terrace, seated near the stone fountain, sketchpad in hand. He looked up as she approached, eyes searching hers for answers. "Push Kane," she began, voice brittle. "The man who walked out on me and my unborn child was your colleague." His grip on the pencil tightened. "Evan Hale," she said. "He arranged everything. He's the one who recommended me." "Did you know?" Asher's face turned pale. "Not until recently. When I saw your full name on the old contract, I remembered. He spoke of you once, briefly. Didn't you say anything?" "And because I was afraid. Afraid you'd think I brought you here for revenge, or pity, or worse, for his sake." She crossed her arms, keeping distance. "And what was the real reason?" He set the pencil down. "Because the first night you walked in, you looked me in the eye, not like I was broken, not like I was a fallen man, but just a man. And I wanted to hold on to that feeling." She shook her head slowly, the weight of the truth dragging her chest tight. "But none of this was real. The marriage, the money, the match, it was all arranged by him." Asher's voice cracked. "Not all of it. You stayed, you listened, you challenged me. You saw me before I could even see myself again." Lila's throat tightened. She looked away, past the shadows dancing across the lawn. "You should have told me the truth, from the beginning." She took a deep breath, then said the words that tore at her own heart. "I can't stay." He stood slowly, pain flickering across his face. "Lila, please. I need time to think, to breathe without wondering if everything around me is a lie." He didn't follow her, didn't beg, just whispered, "Then I'll wait, however long it takes." Lila turned and walked back inside, heart pounding, vision blurred. She packed a small bag, grabbed her son's worn blue backpack from the hall, and quietly left the mansion. They checked into a small roadside inn on the edge of town. The room was modest, dimly lit but quiet. Safe, her son curled into her arms that night, oblivious to the war inside her chest. But as sleep stole over her, one thought refused to let go. Even behind all the secrets, Asher had never treated her like a transaction. He had given her space, respect, and something she hadn't known she needed, gentle strength. And still the question echoed, if the beginning was a lie, could what followed still be true? The next morning, she found a letter slipped under her door. It was written in Asher's tight, slanted hand. "I can't change how we began, but I can choose how we continue. Not with contracts, not with silence, but with truth. If you ever come back, Not as someone I hired, but as someone I love. I'll be waiting." She folded the letter slowly, eyes stinging. He hadn't tried to fix her. He'd simply seen her. And now she had to decide if she still saw him too. The motel room was quiet, save for the steady hum of the air conditioner and the faint sound of cartoons flickering from the old television. Lila sat on the edge of the bed, her mind circling Asher's letter like a bird unable to land. Her son, Daniel, was curled beside her with a coloring book in his lap, humming softly to himself. For the first time in days, she let herself breathe. Then he coughed. Once, then twice. Then he stopped humming. "Daniel?" she asked, her voice tentative. He looked at her with wide, glassy eyes and then collapsed forward. She screamed. Her words spun. The front desk clerk called for an ambulance, but Lila couldn't wait. She carried her limp son into the car, hands trembling, driving through red lights and whispered prayers. She didn't know where else to go, but her heart drove her to the only place she could trust. Asher. The estate loomed under a gray sky. She burst through the front doors, Daniel barely breathing in her arms. "Help him," she cried. Asher appeared in the hallway like a shadow made solid. He froze for only a second, then moved with purpose. "Dining room. Now." He cleared the table in one sweep and laid Daniel down gently. His hands, the hands he claimed no longer worked, moved with speed and skill. "Pulse is thready," he muttered, breathing shallow. "Lila, keep his airway open." She followed blindly. "What is it? What's happening?" "His heart," Asher said, eyes focused, "and possibly a buildup of fluid in the lungs." He grabbed a first aid kit, rifled through supplies. It wasn't much, but he made do. With a precise jab, he inserted a needle into Daniel's chest. The child gave a gasp, a sharp breath in. Lila sobbed. Within minutes, Daniel was breathing again, weak but alive. Asher lifted his eyes slowly. "In just a few minutes to get him to a hospital. But he'll make it now." She couldn't speak. She only nodded, clutching her son like he was her heartbeat. At the hospital, doctors stabilized Daniel and confirmed what Asher had suspected, a congenital heart condition, previously misdiagnosed as mild asthma. Lila sat beside her son's hospital bed, still trembling. She glanced down at the new file the nurse had handed her. There it was, in black and white. The original pediatric misdiagnosis had come from a Dr. Evan Hale. Her stomach twisted. Evan. Her ex. The man who left her. The man who orchestrated her match with Asher. And now she knew. He had failed her son, just like he had failed her. Back at the estate, Lila returned with Daniel asleep in her arms. Asher met her on the porch, eyes unreadable. "Takes you," she said softly. "Thanks to you." He gave the faintest nod. "I should have done more. Sooner." She looked at him, really looked. The man before her was not the broken recluse the world had discarded. He was steady, brilliant, kind, capable of both tenderness and pain, capable of choosing to help even after being hurt. "It was Evan, wasn't it?" she asked. He didn't deny it. "Yes, he tried to bury what happened to your son, just like he helped bury me." "Did you? You married me to fix it, to settle some score?" His face twisted. "No. I married you because the world failed you, and so did I. I didn't want to be another man who did nothing." Tears welled in her eyes. "You should have told me the truth from the beginning." "No?" She looked at the garden beyond the house, the stone path winding through the wildflowers she had planted. She remembered the way his hand had trembled near hers, the way his silence had always seemed to carry more weight than words. "You weren't trying to save me," she whispered. "You were trying to make things right." He didn't answer. But she saw it in his eyes, regret, respect, and something far more fragile. She stepped back, heartbreaking. "But I still can't stay. Not yet, not after all the lies." He lowered his head. "Then I won't ask you to." She turned away, Daniel still sleeping in her arms, and walked back toward the car. This time, he didn't stop her. This time, she didn't look back. but even as she drove away, her fingers trembled on the wheel, not from anger, from the ache of knowing that, beneath the secrets and silence, she had glimpsed something true. And now, she had to decide if truth was enough to forgive the rest. Lila sat by Noah's hospital bed, watching the slow, rhythmic rise and fall of his chest. Machines beeped quietly around him, but he looked peaceful, like he was just sleeping off a long, terrible dream. Asher hadn't left the room once. He stood near the monitors, eyes alert, hands folded, as though he were still in a surgery theater. "You stayed," she whispered. Asher turned to her. He needed someone who wouldn't panic. She looked up at him. "You weren't supposed to know how to handle that." His voice lowered. "I wasn't supposed to care either." The door opened. A young resident entered with test results, offering them to Lila. Her eyes scanned the page, then stopped cold. This isn't a new condition." The doctor nodded. Noah's symptoms trace back at least a year. The misdiagnosis he received early on, it delayed everything. Lila's hands trembled. "Who made that diagnosis?" The resident hesitated. It was Dr. Evan Hale. The name struck her like ice water. Her ex, the man who vanished, the man who recommended her to Asher. Her voice cracked. "That means my son's suffering started long before I ever met you." Asher sat beside her. "That's why I called for you. When I saw your file, when I saw his, I knew I had to do something." "You knew," she whispered. "I didn't fake this marriage to pity you, Lila. I did it because I thought I could fix at least one thing I helped break, whether directly or not." Her eyes glistened. "And you never thought to tell me?" "I was afraid you'd think I was trying to buy forgiveness." She rose from the chair slowly, eyes never leaving his. "You didn't just marry me to save him. You married me to save yourself." Asher nodded once, solemnly. "Maybe I did." Lila picked up her coat, brushing past the door. Her voice was calm, but final. "I believe you care, but I can't stay with someone who hid this much for this long. You should have told me from the start." She walked out, the door shutting softly behind her, leaving Asher in silence, with only the machines and the sound of a boy's breath, steady and whole again. The motel room was quiet, except for the hum of the old mini-fridge and the flicker of the television. Lila sat on the edge of the bed, arms wrapped around her knees, her son sleeping soundly beside her. On screen, the camera panned across the lavish ballroom of the International Medical Charity Gala. Chandeliers, velvet drapes, and people in tuxedos and gowns, clinking glasses and whispering in curated tone. Then she saw him. Asher win. He walked out, not wheeled, not pushed, but walking slowly, steadily, with a dark cane gripped in his right hand. A hush swept over the crowd, a ripple of confusion and awe. The camera zoomed in. His eyes were clear, focused, shoulders squared. Lila's breath caught. She gripped the blanket tighter. He reached the podium and paused. For a second, he seemed to scan the room, as if searching for something or someone. Then he began. "I used to think silence was safety," he said. "That disappearing would erase the pain. But it doesn't. It only grows louder in the dark." A few people in the audience looked stunned. Others whispered to each other. "I was a surgeon once. I lived by precision. I believed I could save everyone. Until I couldn't." He looked down for a breath, then back up. "Patient died under my care. The full story was never told, and I let it stay that way because I thought I deserved exile. I thought shame was justice." Lila wiped at her cheek, surprised by the tears already falling. "Someone walked into my life, not because I deserved it, but because she chose to. She didn't ask for perfection, just truth. And because of her, I'm standing here." The audience remained silent, rapt. "I'm not here tonight to defend the past. I'm here to build something new. For every patient misdiagnosed, for every voice dismissed, for every life that could still be saved." He reached into his jacket and unfolded a small booklet. "This is the beginning of the Win Heart Foundation," he said, "a partnership between survivors, caregivers, and forgotten stories. a place for second chances, medical, emotional, human. He paused again, and this time his voice grew softer. To the one watching, I don't know if you're out there, but if you are, I don't need a contract anymore. I just need you. Lila's breath hitched. He didn't name her, but he didn't have to. The speech ended. A standing ovation. Cameras flashed. But Asher didn't linger. He stepped down, cane tapping against marble, and disappeared backstage. Lila turned off the television. She didn't speak. She stood, got her coat, and pressed a soft kiss to her son's forehead. Then she laughed. Outside the ballroom, beneath a soft drizzle of late spring rain, Asher stood under a lamppost, his hair damp, suit wrinkled slightly at the shoulders. He didn't expect her. So when he saw her walking toward him, coat wrapped tight, steps uncertain, he froze. Lila stopped a few feet away. Her eyes were red but open, searching. He didn't speak. She did. 26. I meant every word. I didn't come here for a foundation, she whispered. I came here because I wanted to hear it from you. I don't need a contract anymore, he said again, his voice rough. I just need you. She stepped closer. So do I. He let out a shaky breath and she collapsed into his arms. Asher held her like she might disappear again, his arms wrapped gently but fully around her. The drizzle soaked through their clothes, but the visory was just the sound of her quiet sobs against his chest and his hand running slowly down her back. She said, his voice low, for not telling you sooner, for letting fear decide everything. Lila pulled back, just enough to look up at him. Her eyes, swollen and tired, still held that same force, honest, unwilling to pretend. I don't want perfection, she said. I never did. I just wanted the truth. I was afraid that if you knew everything about my license, about your ex, about the lie of my chair, you'd leave. Sweetly, I did, she whispered, but I didn't stay gone. Asher looked away for a beat, swallowing down the lump rising in his throat. I didn't build that foundation just for guilt. I did it because of you, because I saw how much you fight for people, even when they don't fight for you. Lila's fingers traced the edge of his lapel. You stood up tonight, but you've been standing long before that. You just didn't see it. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box weathered at the corners. He opened it. Inside was a simple gold band. No contracts, no conditions, he said softly. Just love, just life. Together. Lila stared at it, tears brimming again. Then she took the ring, closed the box and placed it gently against his chest. She whispered. He laughed, breathless and full of disbelief, like someone finally exhaling after holding their breath for years. They didn't need a grand moment or applause. This was enough. The rain, the quiet, the truth between them. They walked back to the car hand in hand. Lila held tightly to him, not because he needed the help, but because she needed to feel that he was real. That after everything, he had chosen her freely, and she, him. At the motel, her son stirred awake as she stepped back into the room. Mom? He asked sleepily. She bent down beside him, brushing the hair from his face. It's okay, baby. We're going home soon. To the mansion, he mumbled. She glanced at Asher, who smiled at the child like he was looking at his future. New Haven, she said, gently. To somewhere new. Somewhere we build together. A few days later, headlines ran again. But this time, the story was different. Surgeon returns with new purpose. The Winhart Foundation launches to aid misdiagnosed families. Public response was overwhelming. Donations poured in. Asher didn't hide anymore. He stood in front of cameras, no longer using the chair unless needed for long distances. He shared stories of patients who fell through the cracks, of second chances, of healing not just the body, but the truth. Lila stayed by his side, not just as a partner in name, but in life. She helped set up medical review teams, hired nurses, and created a new initiative for single mothers to pursue careers in care work. Together, they rebuilt not what was lost, but something better. A future. And in that future, there was no need for silence. No need for contracts. Just truth. The clinic was small, sunlit, and built with purpose. Its sign was hand-carved, simple but powerful. The Winrant's Free Health Center. Beneath it, etched in smaller letters, were the words, "For every voice once unheard." Lila stood in front of the clinic's glass doors, her fingers tracing the curve of her name beside Asher's. It didn't feel like a monument. It felt like healing carved into stone. I sighed. Patients waited, many uninsured, most forgotten. But now, they had somewhere to go. Nurses bustled gently through the rooms. Lila had handpicked and trained several of them, all single mothers like her, all women who had been told they couldn't do more. But now, they were learning, thriving. She walked past the reception desk and paused at the wall where photos hung. First patients, success stories, babies born safely, elders whose lives had been extended not by wealth, but by compassion. Asher was inside the exam room, kneeling beside an elderly woman in a wheelchair. He had her laughing. Julius, a love coat, just a button-down and sleeves rolled up, a stethoscope draped loosely around his neck, and a softness in his eyes that once was buried beneath grief. After she walked the patient out, Lila waited by the garden path. When Asher joined her, wiping his hands with a towel, he leaned against the doorway and watched her. "It still doesn't feel real," she said. As he replied, "Because you helped make it." Lila looked at the small vegetable garden just beyond the fence. "I thought I'd hate this place after everything. The lies, the silence." He nodded. "You had every right." She turned to him. "There's something I need to know, Asher, and I need it without hesitation." He met her gaze, breath steady. "Did you know about Evan before I came here? Not after, not somewhere in the middle. Before." His jaw tightened. He hesitated, then nodded. "I did," he admitted. "He blackmailed me." The words hit like wind knocked from her lungs. "Found out after I signed the contract. I wanted to back out, thought I'd been manipulated. But then, I met you, and you weren't what I expected. You were kind, honest, brave. Everything I didn't deserve." "Should have told me," she said softly. "I was afraid if you knew, you wouldn't stay. Not because you didn't care, but because you'd pity me, and I couldn't bear to be looked at that way again." Lila blinked back the sting in her eyes. The pain in his voice wasn't performative. It was raw. He wasn't making excuses. He was standing in truth. "I see you," she whispered. "I see you. All of you." He looked down, his voice rough. "I spent so long thinking my silence was survival, but you showed me it can be healing too. When it's shared." She stepped closer. "I forgive you, Asher, not because you were perfect, but because you finally let me in." They sat on the edge of the garden bed, where marigolds and thyme had begun to bloom in messy, hopeful rows. It wasn't pristine like the rest of the estate once was, but it was alive, honest, like them. Asher reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, velvet box. Lila froze. He didn't open it right away. "Kept this," he said, voice low, "not because I thought I'd ever use it, but because part of me wanted to believe there'd be a day you'd look at me and see something worth choosing." She looked at the box, then at him. "Freddie did," she whispered. "Not because you saved me, but because you saw me." He finally opened the box. Inside wasn't a flashy ring. It was simple, silver, hand-graved. But the engraving stopped her breath. No more silence, no more shame. Tears slipped down her cheek before she could stop them. "I don't want a contract," he said. "I want a vow, a real one, from two people who've lost and fought and still choose each other anyway." She took the ring from the box with trembling hands. "Then let's plan a wedding, a real one, not for business, for love." He smiled, genuine, radiant, unguarded. "Can I ask for one thing?" she said, swiping at her cheeks. "Anything. I want Eli to walk me down the aisle." Asher's eyes widened slightly. "You mean?" She nodded. "He asked me once if he could call you Dad. I told him, not yet. I think now is the time." Asher swallowed hard, looking out at the horizon. "I've held scalpels, instruments, surgical plans worth millions, but nothing has ever meant more than that." They stood and walked toward the back porch together, hands brushing, then clasping, fully. A few weeks later, the garden was transformed. Strings of fairy lights hung between wooden arches. The smell of jasmine and lemon balm floated in the air. Guests filled the folding chairs, neighbors, former patients, nurses from Lila's new program. Even some of the board members who once turned their backs on Asher came, humbled by the man he had become. Eli wore a tiny gray suit and clutched a satin pillow like his life depended on it. His smile beamed wider than the sun. Lila wore a soft lace gown, not extravagant but utterly hers. Her hair was loose, skin glowing not from makeup but from peace. And Asher stood waiting. No chair, just a cane, and a heart that no longer hid. When she reached him, he took her hand and whispered, "You gave me back my hands, not to operate but to hold yours." Lila smiled through her tears. "And you gave me something I never thought I'd have, a partner, not a savior, a home." They exchanged vows under the blooms they once planted together. Hope, this time, was their soil. The garden bloomed with white roses, and soft music danced in the air. Guests had tributes from the clinic, mothers from Lila's nursing program, and former patients gathered beneath an arch, draped in ivy and hope. Lila stood near the altar in a flowing ivory gown, her eyes brimming with quiet joy. Asher waited at the end of the aisle, not in a wheelchair, but standing, tall, cane in hand, pride in his spine. His suit was simple, his face calm, but when he saw her, everything in him trembled with awe. Their son, now steady on his feet after months of careful recovery, held a satin pillow and walked carefully down the aisle as ring-bearer. His grin was wide and missing a front tooth. He waved at his mother and tripped slightly, drawing laughter from the crowd. When Lila reached Asher, he took her hand with reverence. The music faded, all became still. The officiant asked if they wished to share personal vows. Asher nodded, then turned to Kate. "You gave me back my hands," he said softly. "Not for surgery, but for holding yours. I lost everything, my name, my future, even myself. But you gave me something greater than redemption. You gave me the courage to be seen again." Lila blinked back tears. Her voice shook as she responded. "You weren't my savior, Asher. You were my equal, my partner, my home. You didn't fix my life, you stood beside me while I rebuilt it. And that means more than any fairy tale ever could." The guests wiped tears. The rings were exchanged, and when the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss was quiet, tender, and full of every unspoken promise. Later, during the reception on the lawn, fairy lights twinkled above tables lined with handwritten notes from patients and mothers whose lives had changed through their programs. Inside the clinic, now fully operational, a new wing bore a bronze plaque, the Lila and Asher Wynn Center for Healing. Beneath it, another, for those who've been forgotten, misjudged, or silenced. "This place sees you." Photographs lined the hallway. Lila holding the hand of a young woman in a hospital gown. Asher teaching a group of volunteers. A ribbon-cutting ceremony with their son giggling in the background. And above them all, a wall labeled "Second Chances," filled with framed letters from those they'd helped. Underneath one frame, a small picture of Juliet, Asher's ex, rested with a note that read, "Forgiven doesn't mean forgotten, but it does mean free." In a quiet moment, Lila stepped inside the clinic's nursery. She held a newborn wrapped in lavender cloth, a baby girl no older than a few weeks. Her smile was soft, full of wonder. "Sweetheart," she whispered, "that's your father." She pointed to a photo of Asher in surgical scrubs on the far wall. "He used to save lives with those hands. Then he saved mine." The baby cooed, gripping her finger. Lila kissed her forehead, heart swollen with gratitude. Behind her, Asher appeared in the doorway. He watched them, eyes damp. "Her name?" he asked gently. Lila looked at him, then down at their daughter. "Hope," she said. Asher stepped forward, his cane tapping softly on the clinic's tile floor. He reached out, and Lila placed baby Hope gently in his arms. For a moment, he just held her. No words, no movement, just the weight of everything that had come before and the fragile beauty of what lay ahead. "Ask so, boy," he whispered. "She's strong," Lila replied, "like her father." He looked up, eyes meeting hers. "I never thought I'd be someone's father. I never thought I'd be someone's home." Lila smiled. "You already were. You just didn't know it." Outside, their guests continued to laugh and celebrate, but inside the clinic, time seemed to slow. Asher handed the baby back and gently placed a hand on Lila's back, guiding her to the wall of second chances. "You built this," he said, "not me." "We built it," she corrected, "together." The sound of little feet running down the hall broke the stillness. Their son burst through the door with a chocolate-stained smile and a bouquet of crumpled daisies in his hand. "I picked these for Mom," he announced proudly, "and for Hope." Lila bent down and kissed his cheek. "Thank you, sweetheart." Asher chuckled. "You've got good taste." "And you know," their son said confidently, "I picked you too." The family stood there, imperfect, messy, whole. That evening, the garden transformed again under the stars. String lights flickered, and soft music floated through the night air. Asher stood near the microphone, coaxed into one final speech by the guests. Lila watched from their table, Hope nestled in her arms, her head resting on her chest. "We used to believe a man was only as valuable as what he could do with his hands," Asher began, his voice steady. "I lost my license. I lost my name. I thought I had nothing left to give. But love taught me something I had never learned in all my years of study. Sometimes healing isn't about fixing others. It's about letting someone stay long enough to help fix you." He turned, eyes locking with Lila's across the garden. "This woman, this family, gave me more than a second chance. They gave me a name I'd never earned until now. Husband, father, partner." A hush fell over the garden. Some clapped, others wept, but Lila simply stood and walked toward him. When she reached his side, she leaned into the microphone, her voice soft but clear. "Sometimes love doesn't arrive in a storm, sometimes it walks in quietly, on a cane, with secrets." She turned to Asher. "But I see you now, all of you, and I love every part." They kissed again, not for show, but because they needed to. As the night deepened, the final scene played out inside their home. The clinic doors closed, the guests left. Their son fell asleep, curled up with a stuffed giraffe on the living room couch. Lila rocked Hope by the window, moonlight painting silver across her skin. Asher stood behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "And more contracts," he whispered. "And more secrets," she replied. Fade to black. Sometimes the man behind the chair is the one who stands for you. Forever.